It's a very brave but also slightly odd thing for a young man to end up doing, Harry. So how did it happen to you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm a journalist. Before I was working at Hope Not Hate, I was a freelancer living in Manchester, looking at how the strange confluence of anti-vaxxers and far-right activists were working together. This was at the pandemic or just after it. And I was becoming really concerned about new ways that the far-right were mobilizing in this country, targeting refugees, asylum seekers, migrants in their accommodation, and building this new momentum. I really wanted to look at what is giving the far right its new oomph. They make up a majority of referrals to the Prevent counter-radicalization program and a majority of terrorism convictions in this country. So there's never been a more urgent time to try and understand and hopefully disrupt what they're doing.
And that involved you pretending to be sympathetic to their cause and infiltrating, which I think is the only word we could use, some organisations that are known to the general public, some that have run for office in this country, and some that are not or were not. So let's begin with the first category. What did you do in that field?
So I pretended to be a guy called Chris, and I joined a few far-right groups in this country, one of which was Britain First, a far-right political party run by Paul Golding, a former BNP activist. And he believes in what he calls a strategy of the ballot and the boot, a combination of really aggressive street activism and electoral politics. And so I joined them when they were campaigning in their local elections in spring last year. And what I saw inside the organisation was way more extreme than what I could have imagined, much more extreme than what the organisation tries to present to the wider world.
What offended you or surprised you the most?
The thing that really shocked me when I was joining a canvassing session at the by-election in Tamworth late last year was the activists gathering to make anti-Semitic jokes that are unrepeatable on air, unfortunately.
You are at great risk when you do things like this, a risk of exposure most obviously, but the adrenaline must pump at a rate of knots.
Yeah, it was like living on a diet of pure cortisol. The only way I can sort of describe it is, that feeling when you're about to slip over on an icy pavement, or you step onto the road and you suddenly notice that a car is speeding towards you. It's like that in your head all the time.
Golding in particular has got a conviction, I think, for headbutting a man in a nightclub, as well as breaking a court order on entering mosques. I guess, I choose my words carefully, people won't be enormously shocked to discover some of what you found out went on behind closed doors. Publicly very careful to avoid the anti-Semitism that always goes hand in hand with these kind of eugenic-related views, or these very much race-related views. Also, the desire to see this country while simultaneously claiming to be patriotic. The expressed desire to see the country suffer all manner of privations and horrors, because that helps create an environment in which this kind of poison can flourish. You got that on tape as well, I think.
Exactly. I don't think I can repeat the clip on air, but Paul...
You can see it at 10 o'clock tonight.
You can see it at 10 o'clock tonight. But to summarise it, when Paul thought that no one unfriendly was listening, he confided to me once in a pub after a day of leafleting that he wanted to see this country descend into, to paraphrase it, let's call it a nightmare, so that would give people inspiration to vote for him or support him or donate him. And ultimately what he really wants is donations from people.
Yeah, don't they all? And then we come to the thing that I found closer to almost Hollywood style revelation. When you went undercover with a group that looks into race, a bogus race science. There's a history to this. Students of this kind of stuff will be familiar with the phrase Pioneer Fund, which was pro-Nazi, believed to be defunct, subscribed to notions of the master race, at its simplest, and turned out not to be entirely defunct at all. And not only that, and when I watched it, the identity of the person that you identify was still, I think the lawyers, I watched an early cut, I know now that name is in, but you find someone who's funding a really big modern day eugenics movement. That is absolutely chilling. That's the stuff of, as I say, of novels and movies, but this is happening in real time under our noses.
It was a huge surprise when we discovered this name. I mean, I was spending time undercover in this group called the Human Diversity Foundation, which tries to push debunked race science into the mainstream. And unfortunately, they are enjoying some success at the moment. And they had bandied about this name of a wealthy investor who had made his money in Silicon Valley. And, they were fond of saying that his donation of $1.3 million was just a rounding error on his net worth. And it took a lot of effort to try and get this name out. And my colleague Patrick Hermanson and I were really proud when we did ultimately discover that it was the inventor of a dating website called Adult Friend Finder, who's called Andrew Conroe.
And that speaks to the depth, if you like, of the organisation, because the thing I found breathtaking was the structure that was in place and the number of people that were working to do what, Jack? To get into public discourse, to get into the mainstream stuff that would have delighted Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler.
Right. I think that had the original race scientists who made the Pioneer Fund been alive today, they would have seen a lot to be proud with in the Human Diversity Foundation. Unfortunately, the ideas of race science that were so popular in Nazi Germany and indeed in 20th century America, where a lot of forced sterilizations took place, have never really gone away.
Do you know, I was reading up a little earlier before you came in about the 61-year-old man who has died in jail, one of the rioters from this summer, convicted of violent disorder. And he was described by his own lawyer as a conspiracy theorist who had a conspiracy theory against anyone and any form of authority, referencing the deep state, referencing NASA, being opposed to the police, being opposed to journalists, being opposed to civil servants, police chiefs, the Environment Agency, and none of the people responsible for introducing this poison into Peter Lynch's life, and I'm not defending his actions, but you can mourn the passing of a fellow human in objective terms. None of the people responsible for that will ever be anywhere near a courtroom, let alone a prison, without work like the work that you do.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I mean, I think that trying to draw out some of these organisations that are operating in secret is really, really important. And to know that there are people pushing some really pernicious ideas into the mainstream and are, as I said, unfortunately, making some headway.
And what about you? Because you can't do this again. This is and it was fascinating watching some of your interactions with Patrick as well, who kind of mentored you, but he'd done similar work in the past. This is, I mean, really, you are all, by definition, one-hit wonders, aren't you? The kind of reporters who go undercover into this kind of context. So what do you do next? How do you ever, use my words responsibly, how do you ever have that kind of level of excitement and satisfaction again?
I don't think I'm going to be. I don't miss being undercover. It's an enormous relief to hang up my secret camera. I'm going to be getting on with the day-to-day work at Hope Not Hate, which is opposing fascism in all its forms.
And you can find out more, of course, about Hope Not Hate by watching the documentary this evening. Also looking at some of their work in other fields with much more familiar names to people who listen to this programme. There's also a couple of your colleagues, of course, have been on Full Disclosure. Most recently, Nick Lowles, the CEO of Hope Not Hate, who has pursued this work like you at great personal risk. I should read what a spokesman for Conroe said when he was approached for comment. He said that he had helped to fund the HDF project, that's the Human Diversity Foundation, at the beginning, but that it now, quotes, appears to have deviated from its initial objective and the motivation for his funding, which was to promote free and non-partisan academic research. They said that he rejected racism and discrimination, and he was unaware of the involvement of a designated right-wing extremist, and added, in response to the information you've provided, he has cut ties with the Human Diversity Foundation, ceased his funding, and ordered an immediate review of governance processes across all of his philanthropic activities to ensure such a situation does not arise again. You can find chapter and verse on the situation that did arise at 10 o'clock tonight on Channel 4. What happens if you bump into any of these people again? And there's a particularly powerful scene in a restaurant isn't there? Where you are really on the brink of discovering the identity of the person who's bankrolling all of this. And you have to win the trust of these people. They begin to think, they're 50% trying to impress you and 50% thinking that you might be able to throw a few quid. They've always got the begging bowl out, these people. It's absolutely extraordinary. What happens if you bump into one of them again?
That's something I'm trying not to think about too much, but it's all going to come up again next year. I'm writing a book about what I did called Year of the Rat out in May. And so I'm taking a lot of security precautions to try and keep a low profile until that time next year.